Welcome to another episode of the Powerless to Powerful Recovery podcast. My name's Jason. I'm an alcoholic and addict. As always, our mission is to share experience, strength, and hope across multiple media platforms. The story of addiction and the road to recovery. We are not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous or any other 12-step based organizations or groups in any way. And it's the Powerless to Powerful podcast. And as you see, I have one guest here today. My beautiful wife is here. Big shout out to Ash. She's here today. But I can't forget to give my co-host a shout out. Ronnie, no matter what. Ron, Big Ron. Big shout out to you. We miss you. We can't wait to have you back here at the studio to be able to record. And today we are on location at Desert Recovery Centers at the men's location in Glendale. And it is the most beautiful property. But today, by popular demand, welcome my wife.
Thank you.
How long have we been married for?
14 years.
14 years? Is that
This
real math or
year.
prison math?
That's real math.
Oh, that's real math? Okay. Well, I have you back on the show, and for a lot of the listeners all over the world, they've supported us through our journey, through the podcast journey, but we've got a lot of new followers, a lot of new people coming on with Desert Recovery Centers and everything we got going on marketing-wise, and we're getting a ton of messages. And what do they want to hear, Ash?
They want to know how we did it. They want to know how we ended up on the other side of addiction, on the other side of incarceration, how we found, success in our own way, and how we're living a healthy, balanced life now after all that.
We have balance?
I mean, I try.
Sometimes we do. I think we do. And that's the most important part. When we started this podcast, it started about 3 years ago. It was 2 days out of an incarceration after doing 7 years on an 8-year prison sentence. And the whole mission of the podcast was just to bring hope, to bring exposure to the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, to bring a path, to bring a solution. And that was the same sort of strategy, really, when it comes to Desert Recovery Centers and the Instagram accounts and all the media accounts. The biggest thing for us, it doesn't matter for me what I wanted to get out of it really truly is if you are currently in active addiction, or you are in early recovery, or you're someone like myself who is long-term recovery now at this point, no matter where you are in your journey, step zero, or you're in long-term recovery, if you went on to anything Desert Recovery, or you looked at any of the media stuff that we've put out, you have value behind it no matter where you are in your journey. And that's the biggest thing. But you heard that J word, journey. Has it been a journey, Ash?
Oh, it's been a ride, a journey and a ride, or as an adventure, as I'd like to call it.
Our daughter calls it an adventure. It was one big adventure, and so I think it's important to kind of understand just the dynamic of our relationship. So I kind of want to just take a quick minute or two just to kind of let all the listeners know about your family dynamic, what it was like growing up, just real brief so they can get an idea, because our relationship and the dynamic of that is I'm someone who suffers from the disease of addiction and you do not. And so you've had to, adapt to learn my path of recovery, to understand me better and so much more. But it took a lot of years. Did you say 14 years?
14 years.
14 years. Okay. So it took quite some time to get there. We just celebrated 6 years of recovery. But what was it like growing up? What's the family dynamic like? Why don't you just give a brief synopsis of that dynamic with your family?
Yeah. So my parents are from Southern California. They moved to Chandler in the late 80s when my sister and I were really little. I'm the oldest of three, so I have a younger sister and a younger brother. Our family's pretty normal, We had our annual trips to Disneyland. We're always planning big parties. We have a lot of cousins our age. We did everything together. I never dealt with addiction, directly. I do have some extended family that went through some things, but for the most part, it never affected my life personally. So going through things with you was definitely a challenge because I had never seen anything like that.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Each of my parents had a sibling that they supported in their own way. So when I was younger, we had two of my cousins that came to live with us because my mother's sister was dealing with her own stuff. So I've always been very aware of how it affects the entire family. And when you can help, you help. And that was kind of my take on when you see someone struggling with something that you don't understand. You don't really ask questions. You just jump in, you take care of your cousins, you take care of your family, you wish them well, and you just do what's asked of you. So it was very like a vague kind of thing that we're all going through, but we just knew, okay, they need some extra love. We're just going to jump in. And that's kind of my experience. I didn't know specifics. I just knew to be accepting, understanding, and then that was kind of it.
I think you're right, though, because, as an addict and as addicts, we always say that I'm only hurting myself. My disease is only affecting me. And it couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth, because it does affect every aspect of the family. And when building teams while working in recovery or building the Desert Recovery Center's team, I think it's always important to have that family member that doesn't have that craving, that switch of addiction, but has supported a loved one like you have with me and the family members growing up, that can bring that unique perspective when the client says, I'm only harming myself. Right. And sometimes hearing it from another loved one who is on the other side of things and just that side can really bring perspective to a client. And so, and the truth is, you're a normie, right? Correct. So when she has a glass of wine, it acts like a depressant, and she gets tired and hungry and it's ready for bed. It acts as a true relaxant. I have an allergic reaction, right? So when I drink, I get turned up. It acts as a stimulant. I'm getting loud. I'm high-fiving everybody, and I'm getting rowdy, right? And you're getting tired. And using that description of the allergic reaction, not everyone can relate to depressants acting as stimulants and stimulants acting as depressants. Of course, tolerance comes into play, and it's a true depressant because you can't keep your head up, right? But as we continue to try to learn and try to figure these things out, it really gives us the ability to understand what we're going through, right? And so my parents have supported me through everything, and they've supported you and through our journey together and all the years and everything that we've been through. Dad is, I don't know if I would say dad is one of us. I mean, maybe he's been functioning. And so I hate to ever say that anyone's an alcoholic or an addict when they function, because in my experience, that's not a thing. But mom's a normie like you. You got a ton in common with mom, brother. And then my sister's coming out here. We haven't seen her in so long, 15 years maybe. I mean, it could be more than that. And you saw her the last time about 4 or 5 years ago when I was still incarcerated. You took a trip out to New York. And so we have a supportive family, but it always wasn't that way, right? It always wasn't supportive, maybe on your side with me. And when I look at the reality of the situation, being a father of daughters, how would I act and how would I operate? What would I think of my daughter's significant other who was struggling, who's now going to be through incarceration, and what's that look like, But I think that kind of gave everybody kind of a picture of our family dynamic, kind of where we come from. And, when we met, that was one of the main things that we talked about is, what were our religious preferences? What was our family dynamic? What were the values? How do we want to raise our kids? And what were some of the important things to us? What were some of the biggest memories that we had as children that we wanted to instill in our kids? And we talked about all those things that really gave us the ability to know that we really had a similar upbringing, But then all of a sudden, in 2009, we meet. So I want to kind of hear, I think it's always interesting with any couple to hear their perspective of how they first met and hear the other one's perspective of how they first met. So I'm going to let you take the wheel on this thing. So why don't you just kind of share where we met, how we met, and where our journey started 14 years ago.
So we were actually working for the same company. I was working in an administrative role. You were on the sales team. My first kind of perspective of you, or my first thoughts in passing, were just, he's so good looking. And I had asked a coworker, what's that guy about? And immediately her first answer was just trouble. Like, don't talk to him. Just stay away from him. Everyone likes him. He's wild. He's crazy. You don't want none of that.
And he just got released from prison
right.
like 3 months ago.
Right. So, in passing, we had some jokes exchanged, little comments here. And I was like, he seems nice. He seems fun. And, a friend of mine in the office, she was like, you would date someone that just got out of prison? I was like, well, does he plan on going back? What does that have to do with me? So immediately I was trying to just not judge off of comments and hearsay and things like that. I wanted to give you a shot. Just understand who you were based off of, these little quirky things you would say and this fun personality. Everyone wanted to work for you. Everyone wanted to be around you. And I was genuinely intrigued. I wanted to know what the allure was. So I tried to just get to know you and understand you a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened, and I kind of remember it the same thing too. I had just, recently been released from an incarceration. I hadn't found a program of recovery. I was just abstinence. I've been sober at this time 3 years. But I hadn't put a program of recovery behind it yet, but I was sober. And I had began to work, and big shout out to Omega Auto Glass. I mean, we were out there doing the windshield, selling windshields, and, we had an 80-person door-to-door team that we used to manage, and it was that's another show, another time. We could do a whole episode on the shenanigans that happen. If just a visual for all the listeners all over the world, if you could think about an 80-person door-to-door door knocking team, if you've ever worked in sales, you know what it is. Not only that, but we had 5 mansions as company houses where too many people live there, and you could only imagine when you're making, a couple $1,000s a week and you're living in a mansion and everybody has untreated mental health and substance abuse issues all at once. So it was definitely a vibe, if you will.
That was an experience for sure.
It was, we call it its own little world, right?
Yes.
And I remember you were the administrator there with the company, and I remember I saw you and you were pretty, but you said you were talking to me and you wanted to talk to me, but you had a funny way of doing it, right? You weren't the nicest. You didn't really put out the vibe that you wanted me to talk to you or you were interested in me. It was actually the complete opposite, So I would say things to you just to get a rise out of you, just to blow your hair back, and you wouldn't even know what I was saying half the damn time, and then one day you sent me a message in response to a soccer game score that I didn't ask you for. I had asked you many things. You shut me down with anything personally, anytime. But this day you sent me a message, and we were both talking to each other about our relationships and what we had been going through. We were both in a relationship at the time, and we were kind of, sharing our struggles with each other. And in that process, I remember it as you saying, could you be good just for me?
Something to that effect. If I were the person you were in a relationship with, would you be able to be kind of the guy I wanted? Would it make a difference if I were that girl?
Yeah. Could you clean up your act and behave yourself at all times?
Right. Something to that effect. But that's what I wanted to know. Was there a real chance? Because I'm not just going to come over at 11 o'clock at night, hang out,
Netflix and chill.
Pajamas. Yeah, just
I want you to be comfortable. That's it. That's all it was.
No.
The first night you came over to my house, we talked the whole entire night.
After a real date.
Okay. All right. So, what ended up happening is we started to have some conversations, and then finally, after you sent me that text message, and then I realized that I actually may possibly have a chance, and I immediately went into retirement. I immediately cleaned up maybe not immediately, but I cleaned up my act pretty quickly after that, and wanted to show you that I was truly serious about this thing. And then we had the best first date ever. So why don't you share about our first date?
Oh, this was probably the worst date I've ever been on. We went to P.F. Chang's on Mill Avenue, and coming from ASU, I was, huge Mill Ave fan. Loved all of it. Loved, just the vibe. I was excited. We met there because you were not coming to pick me up.
She wouldn't tell me where she lived. She wouldn't let me know. I couldn't pick her up at her house. She wasn't coming over to my house. I had to take her on a real date, and this was the first real date.
I'll meet you there. So, of course, he's there before me. Call him on my BlackBerry. Where should I park? And he's like, yeah, there's a parking garage right behind P.F. Chang's. Just go in there.
Yeah, the parking garage on Ash.
Yeah. So I go in there, and not reading hours or, whatever specifics I should have been paying attention to. We go to dinner. Long story short, big guy couldn't pay for the bill.
It was a banking issue. It was a technicality from the bank. When you deposit large checks like I do with no money in your account, apparently they hold it for a couple days. Okay, I was willing to wash dishes. I was willing to do whatever we had to do to pay the tab.
So I paid the tab. We're going to leave. Okay, we go our separate ways. I go to my car, go into the parking garage, and realize that it's closed for the night. It does not
Whoops.
open again until 5 a.m. So my little Toyota Corolla is staying there for the night because there is no way to exit. So again, I call him on my BlackBerry.
First date, she spent the night, boys.
How do I get out of here? He's like, well, I guess you can't. And immediately I was like, is this a setup? How am I having to go back to your house right now? He's like, well, you just have to wait until the morning and I'll bring you back and get your car.
No harm, no foul, no big deal.
Wow, this is happening right now. So there's night number 1, stayed up all night until 5 a.m. talking.
Yeah, I didn't even make a move on you, see?
No.
I didn't lie. I was telling you the truth. All right, and so that was our first date, and I didn't go as planned. You know, I really did truly wanted to pay for dinner. I really did. I mean, I went with every intention of covering the meal and you know, acting like I was a big shot. That was my plan. I did have the Mercedes out front and I had a car wash, no gas in it, no insurance, no tax. Actually, at this time, I had all the things because I was sober at this period of time. So I had the nice car. I had the condo down in the city. I had the nice job. And now I'm in the process of trying to have my first healthy and meaningful relationship. But when we first started talking about, you know, our journey and how we met, we talked about me doing a prison sentence, and we talked about me being sober now for multiple years, over 3 years at this point by the time we first met, over 4 years by the time I relapsed. And when I start to really, you know, think about all that, the problem was there was never a path of recovery in there. I didn't have any tools when guilt, shame, embarrassment, remorse, regret, stress, positive emotions, relationships just in general, and everything that comes with it. And that's what the program is for, or a program or a path of recovery. It gives you a tool to intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me or cause a relapse, right? And I wouldn't have an answer for it. But I didn't have that program yet like I do today. And so we began to start dating, and I took you on some more dates, and, you know, that went on for about 3 or 4 months. And the whole time, first off, I'm in leadership, she's in leadership, and there was a hard no on leadership, fraternizing with each other. So we were undercover for a very long time. Nobody knew, which was pretty fun. I thought that was pretty fun. People started to find out, some things started to happen, and during this period of time, I fell victim to that belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline qualifies him to drink or get high like other men, you know. And I had got off probation over 4 years now, and I wanted to go celebrate, and I went to Vegas, and I was there for one night, and I drank, and everybody knows the story from there, and I relapsed, right? What do you remember about starting to first see signs that things are starting to change with my behavior?
Well, I think being so young, because you have to remember, I was about 23, very naive. I think when you had told me about coming out of prison and all the things that you had dealt with, I kind of felt like there's the end of that chapter. Okay, he went, that's it. Didn't want to get too personal, I don't want to say, because it seemed like it was just something you were done with. Okay, I don't have any cause to worry because you don't plan on going back. I didn't really understand addiction at that point. I didn't understand that you needed to take care of, you know, mind, body, soul, and not surround yourself with, you know, all these terrible things in order to not go back to that. So that, again, that's something I learned way later, but I just figured this is just a choice. He doesn't want to be involved in that anymore. So I'll just trust that he's not going to go back. I didn't understand that partying and drinking and doing whatever you decided to do was inevitably going to put you in a position to feel triggered and then relapse. So that was completely the farthest thing from my mind. I started noticing things just that were unfamiliar and unlike you. Staying in the bathroom longer. I used to hear water the entire time, and I'd be like, what?
I got the sink on. I double flushing the toilet. I got the shower on so she can't hear the lighter in there, or ripping foil, or whatever the case might be.
So I'm like, I thought you were going to the bathroom. Are you taking a shower? I'll be right out.
My stomach hurts.
But it was all the time. So I started buying, you know, stomach medicine. I think this will make you feel better. Just trying to be helpful, not really understanding what the problem was. We always had money, so I never really saw a change in our lifestyle quite yet, but it was more so just day-to-day things, just the bathroom thing was a huge thing. I used to get really paranoid about you being in the bathroom too long. Watching TV, we used to be very engaged and talk about things we were watching, and then all of a sudden I noticed the nodding off.
Yeah, and all of a
I'm
sudden I
like,
can't sleep through. I can't stay awake through a whole movie.
right. I'm like, he's so young. He didn't get off work. It'd be the weekend. We weren't doing anything. Like, why are you so tired? So things like that, I think I noticed first. Just general things about your personality that seem different.
And that's those behavior changes, right? And our family and our loved ones, they can see it right away. We always think we're fooling everyone. We always think that we can get over on them. They're not going to know, but they can recognize the change of behavior, the change in routines. It's the same sort of thing working in recovery. We're watching routines, we're watching behaviors, we're trying to encourage new behaviors, to make change, the consistency, to create a psychic change and introduce positive, lifestyle changes. But for me, once I relapsed and I drank and then I started to take some pills and, I had a nice place, a nice car. I was making decent money, over 6 figures. We had everything. So I can conceal it for a period of time, but you started to recognize things. You started to recognize, me being in the bathroom too long and falling asleep and taking longer when I said I'll be right back, or things of that nature, right? And the addiction becomes progressive, right? So now it's starting to get worse. The symptoms start to become greater. Now you're starting to see the finances, and everything starts to struggle and starts to crumble. Now my work performance, and I had gotten to an accident with an employee in the vehicle under the influence. You drove all the way out to Safford, not knowing what happened, just thinking I got into an accident. So many different things, but what ends up happening, not only it's based on my behavior and my actions 100%, but there was also a piece of them finding out that we were in a relationship, not liking it, and making a decision to fire you versus firing me. And that's what they did. So now they fire my wife. Now I'm pissed off. I'm also strung out. I'm also now spending my money with them before I get it. So now I feel like I can't, quit the job because I owe them money, and, and I'm not going to put any more business about them out there. But, it was, it wasn't a traditional company. We'll just say that.
Correct.
And so ultimately, I get in that accident. I end up getting fired. We end up starting our own auto glass company. We get hit with a non-compete real quick. That gets shut down. And now I'm in full-blown relapse. And now and now it's at the point where I'm running out of options. I'm running out of lies. I'm running out of resources. I'm running out of smoke screens and stunts and plays, and I'm running out of everything. And finally it all comes to a head. And you're 5 months pregnant at this time. We're at your parents' house for Sunday dinner. We get there about 10 a.m. I say, hey, I got to go to the office. I'll be right back. And I don't come back till like midnight. Right? Leave you at your parents' house, 5 months pregnant, with your mom and dad going, what the heck is going on? You're pregnant, right? And I've been gone for over 10 hours now at this point. Finally, I show back up because it's midnight and you have no ride home. And so I show back up there, and finally I can't lie my way out of anything anymore. Obviously, there's something major going on. And so I finally get honest with you for the first time. And then you get me into detox at Community Bridges. What do you remember about detox?
Oh, of all the things we've been through, I think that was something I remember so clearly. It was so terrifying because you had tried to stop previously at home. Just give me a couple
so many
days.
times.
So many days you were dreading the pain of withdrawal. I remember just seeing the pain in your eyes that I'm just like, he can't do this at home again. He needs to be in a medical facility. So with little to no knowledge, I'm Googling everything under the sun. Finally find a bed. He needs to come right now. I remember them telling me he cannot refuse. He needs to come. No questions asked. So it was like 72 hours they had you there, no contact, nothing, no phone calls, nothing. So I'm like 6 months pregnant at this time. And they had these like double doors. I remember like a hospital kind of facility. And I spoke to the admissions person. They said that I can bring like a backpack full of like clothes, comfortable things for you to wear. And then by the time I got there, they said, no, he's in scrubs. He doesn't need any of this. And for some reason, I just lost it. I was like, he just needs something to make him comfortable. I was scared. I knew he was probably scared. Everything was happening so fast that I just wanted to be a part of it, to support. And it was something you had to go through on your own. And that was like lesson number one, that this was going to be something you had to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that was my first and only experience with detox, or not detoxing, but actually being in a detox, a medical facility. I was at Community Bridges. That's my only one. Big shout out to CBI
In Mesa.
and those cheese sandwiches. But it was just a miserable experience. You know, you got to go there for 24 hours. The first 24-hour period, you basically have to be withdrawing enough to require being placed in a bed. Otherwise, they just kick you out. And so I had already got a little bit of information. I was definitely not feeling good at all whatsoever. I was able to get a bed. I was there for 7 days, and now the 7-day detox is done. And you're pregnant. I had, we don't usually, like I said, I didn't have any other options. All the resources were gone. I mean, the money was gone. Everything that material everything is now gone at this point. And my wife's pregnant. We don't have anything now for our daughter. The housing situation is in trouble. We got to make a whole bunch of moves, and I just got out of detox. And I don't even have a job. Right. And I remember you saying, well, I don't know where you're going to go, but that 7 days isn't enough. And there's never enough time in treatment. And you couldn't have been more right at that time. And so we were able to find a bed for me at Crossroads Arcadia.
Actually, you did that on your own. And that was one of the most amazing things, is I had been calling around and they're all telling me, are you private pay? Do you have insurance? I'm like, he has access. Like, what is available for access? And it was little to no options.
This was in 2012. 2011?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was, okay, yeah. So 2011. So now there is a plethora of options and detoxes and treatment centers like Desert Recovery Centers and so many more. But back then, maybe we just didn't know. But there wasn't many options.
You were about to go to the Salvation Army, honestly. That was like the only place I could get you in for little to no money. You were covered. If he comes right now out of detox, we got him. But from what I was hearing, it wasn't the best facility for him to be in. So I was already super nervous. I can't have him in this place. There's no, suitable place for me to visit as a pregnant woman. It was just very stressful. And then he calls me and says, I got myself a scholarship to go to Crossroads.
Yeah, and so I went to Crossroads. I was able to call. Big shout out, rest in peace, Tony Marinucci. He's someone who passed to this disease of addiction. And during that period of time, he was actually in recovery. Again, one of the many long-term stints of recovery that he had. And he was able to talk to Joe Peterson. Big shout out to him over at Crossroads. I was able to make an amends to him when I came out, and I paid him the money back and all the things. But he was able to get me a scholarship. And so I moved from Community Bridges straight over to Crossroads Arcadia. I didn't sleep the whole time I was in detox. The 16-day Right Track program. This is when Crossroads, you did 16 days of Right Track, which is basically inpatient programming. And then you would move to the other side of the facility where they would allow you to work. And it became a sober living at that point. Now it is all inpatient or IOP, and the model has changed, but that's the way it was. And so finally, after I graduated from the 16 days, I finally got my first night of sleep. You were coming to see me. I had started to work the steps, did steps 1, 2, and 3, started to get some relief, thought it was recovery. But the problem for me was, my wife's pregnant. We need this. We need a house. We need a car. We need clothes. We need a crib. We need all these things. And I couldn't think about anything else but doing that and making sure that you were set and I could make sure that we were taken care of. And I remember the day before I was getting ready to finally graduate and now begin to work. And I told you, I'm going to find a telemarketing company. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to make a $2,000 check my first week, and we're going to get an apartment. Don't even worry about it. It's going to be all right. And I remember I asked the guys at Crossroads, where is the closest telemarketing company? And they said, it's a mile down the street. You'll run right into it. I actually sold windshields, door knocking on the way there. And that's how I met my co-host of this show for the first time. Big shout out to Ron. And he was the general manager of that phone room I walked into that day. And I asked him to use a fax machine because I closed 2 windshield deals on the way there. And I began to learn that business. And my first check, I made a $2,000 check, and I moved out of Crossroads, got us an apartment, got us all the baby stuff, did all the things. But I only did steps 1, 2, and 3. And I didn't have 5 phone numbers, and I didn't have my support system, and I didn't have a home group because I didn't think that that was all mandatory stuff because they told me they were suggestions, not directions. Another show, another time. And I was so concerned about all the other things, and I did well for a period of time, right? I built a new business, I was able to build a new company and get the cars again and get the nice house again and rebuild our relationship and the relationship with your parents and be there for the birth of my daughter and be there for her and all the things, was able to do all that. But again, there isn't a program behind life, right? Because way back when I started to associate, back in high school, I started to associate drugs and alcohol with my emotions. Not just negative ones, but positive ones also, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a positive emotion or negative emotion. My solution to making it better or not feeling it is drugs and alcohol, right? So no matter what's going to happen now in life, right? If I don't have some sort of solution behind it and tools and know how to apply them, because the power from the knowledge comes from the application, then I'm going to find myself relapsing again, right? And so what ends up happening is I end up, I like to cut corners, right? And that's one of the biggest things, right? Because we talk about it all the time, the character defects. It's not a drug problem. It's not a heroin problem, an opiate problem. It's not a pill problem. I suffer from character defects, lying, cheating, manipulating, stealing, ego, all those character defects. And when I'm living in them, ultimately I know right from wrong, and I know I don't want my character to be a representation of that. And so when it is a representation of a scumbag, I want to change the way I feel so I don't have to think about it, feel it, or care about it. Right. And it's just that becomes that slippery slope. But I also like to cut corners and I like to make fast money. Right. And that's what recovery's also taught me. All money's not good money. And so I decided at my telemarketing company with Ron that we were going to cut some corners and buy stolen property off our employees so they can be there on time. And that's how it started. Just be here on time. I know why you're late because you got to wake up, go steal, then sell it, then call the dope man, and you can't come to work until you are well. I get it. I lived that life, right? So you're going to bring me the stolen property and have the dope man meet you in the parking lot. That was my bright idea. And that's how it started. And I remember, one day I came home from work like I do every day, and I checked the mail, and in the mailbox, I had a grand jury indictment for a Class 2 felony. And I can still remember that, seeing that indictment, knowing that I already had previous convictions, knowing that that's a Class 2 felony, knowing enough about the prison system to know that I'm in trouble and I'm doing 5 years in prison no matter what, and I got a almost 2-year-old baby. And I remember that for about a week, every day you asked me, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" I couldn't even speak. I was just shook that this had happened, right? And so, but the thing is I didn't have a program of recovery again. So now I'm experiencing negative emotions. Now I got to go do a prison sentence. Now I'm living in fear. Now I have all these things, resentment. I mean, you name it. Selfishness is creeping in. And so the only solution I have to feeling that is drugs and alcohol. So what do? Relapse, right? Because what recovery's taught me is to identify a problem, because that's what I have now. Being sober is awareness, and I'm responsible because I'm aware. And so what recovery teaches me is identify a problem, apply the tools, get to the solution, right? My job is to get to the solution, but I didn't have solutions. I only had problem, add to the problem, make it worse, make it worse, make it worse. What do you remember about when I finally told you that I have a case out there and I'm probably going back to prison?
I remember it being, again, I can see myself hovering over us having this conversation because we were on our balcony, sitting outside on our patio. And I remember thinking, I can do 5 years. We'll just pretend that you're camping. You're going away. You have to get this under control. Obviously you can't do it here. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. 5 years, Bella will be in first grade, second grade. That's okay. She's a little kid. It'll be all right. 5 years is doable. And I was only thinking about my emotional well-being. I can get through 5 years. The time's going to pass either way. I was thinking I can keep us afloat 5 years while you get it together. That was my first thought. Don't worry. Go away. Get your stuff together. I got it. Put me in, coach. It'll be fine. That was my first
That was your first response
Yes.
to it. And that made me feel good. I'm like, okay, all right, yeah, we can get through this, you know. But just like everything, and I've learned over the years, is consequences, they don't go away. They'll always get greater. Anything that happens and you have contact with police officers, it is not going away. It is going to come back. And you're going to have to take care of it at some point, right? And so what ended up happening was we started to look at for lawyers and really start to liquidate some assets. But now I've also relapsed now. And now you're starting to recognize that what the heck? Throw an overdose in the mix and the hospital experience and an overdose and almost died and was in ICU for 5 days. I got page 2'd with new charges for a Craigslist account, for an eBay account. But I also told you that I relapsed, right? Now the business is suffering because I'm not a good employee. I'm not a good friend. I'm not a good husband. When I'm in active addiction, I am no good in any of those areas. So the unmanageability now is kicked in my life. I'm lost the company. The money's gone. You know, and I'm just problem, add to the problem. And so finally, what ends up happening is they OR'd me, they released me on my own recognizance for that first grand jury indictment for the class 2. Then I got another case for a Craigslist account, organized retail theft, right? And then that was pretrial services. And then they got me for the eBay account, right? And then that was another class 4, and that was a $35,000 cash bond. You bonded me out, right? Then I'm on heroin now because I relapsed. Then we take a family trip for 4th of July. I overdose, pretty much die.
Yeah.
Spend 7 days in the hospital. Finally get out of the hospital. We're up in Flagstaff, and I come back down to the valley, and you know, I got this case. I got a drug addiction now, and I don't feel like doing anything. I just know that it is over and it's not going to be good. And so finally, when it's all said and done, I catch another case, you know, for a heroin possession. So now I got a class 2. I'm on release 4. I'm on F4. I'm on release 4. I'm on another class 4 felony. I'm on release 4. And then I catch another case, F4, class 4 felony for possession of heroin. And now I find myself sitting in county jail. Do you remember what day that was when the U.S. Marshals caught me with that drugs?
I do. Like the date?
The date. Do you remember? It's the day before my brother's birthday. It was July 23rd.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that's how I remember it, because it was the day before his birthday. July 23rd of 2014 is when the U.S. Marshals came and got me. And when they did, they had a fear that I was going to leave the country because, you know, what was our plan? What were we going to do? We were going to go to Rocky Point.
Yeah.
We're going to teach Bella Spanish. I'm going to start a satellite telemarketing company, and she's going to be bilingual. It's going to be great, right? Well, some people in my life found out about that. Whatever the case might be, either way, they revoked my bond, sent the marshals, and I had drugs on me when they came and caught a new case on 3 different releases, which means no bond. You are not getting out. And so what ended up happening? You ended up getting me a lawyer, right? What'd you think about that lawyer?
Oh, this poor man. He meant well. He just was not as aggressive as I wanted him to be. He was extremely intimidated by everything that we were up against, especially, you know, the prosecuting lawyer that was...
I'll tell you exactly what happened. This is what happened. You know, finally now I'm in county jail. I got my wife out there trying to get together any money that she possibly can to find me a lawyer. We got to get a lawyer. And so the lawyer came and he said, I can get you guys 5 years. No big deal. Yeah. Right. And we're like, oh my God, pay this man his money right now. And I was in 4th Avenue jail at this point. I'd already got some assault charges and ended up getting maxed out. Now I'm in 23-hour lockdown. I spent a year in 23-hour lockdown. But I remember the day that I got off the phone with you and you said, all right, I'm going to pay this dude. We're going to retain him. Right. And then I remember the very next day, my cellie, the microphone comes on in our cell and he's like, hey, and Sarah, you got a legal visit. I looked at my cellie and I was like, dude, my lawyer's the shit, dude. He's on it. Here the next day, brother. 5 years, brother. I'm going to get it. Right. I was so happy. And I get there and I remember I sat down for the first time with him and he's like, I got bad news for you. And I'm like, we're going to start with bad news already.
He always did.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah. Keep in mind, we just paid him, just retained him now. So he's my official lawyer at this point. And then after he says, yeah, you retain me, we can get 5 years. That's doable. He says, by the way, I actually looked at the paperwork a little bit deeper, and you are in the repeat offender program, brother. That's a mandatory aggravated sentence. So think about a class 2 felony with 2 historical prior convictions, and they use a sentencing chart. And based off that chart, there isn't any mitigating factors. There isn't, it's an aggravated sentence. That's what you get. They stereotype you as a career criminal, repeat offender, menace to society for whatever reason. The cops can do it. The prosecuting, the city can do it. And in my case, it was the Chandler Police Department. For a lot of different reasons. They didn't like that I was flashy. They didn't like that we had the telemarketing company in Chandler with 40 employees. We wouldn't let them serve warrants there. I mean, so many different things, right? And so he says, look, now that 5 years, that ain't happening. You might want to double that number. We're looking at 10. And I remember that we sat there for the next year fighting this case. In 4th Avenue Jail, my pleas were 10 years, 12 years, 18 years, 8 years, 16 years, and finally it all culminated with a settlement conference. And we're going to close up part 1. We'll do a part 2 from where we pick up from this prison sentence, finding recovery and what life's like today. So tune in for part 2. But I remember we sat there for a year in county. I'm getting 23-hour lockdown. Sometimes I get a phone call. I did months in the hole for things that weren't even in my control. It was just a really, really hard time period. It was new for you. There was just so much going on during that period of time. And finally, it all culminated with a settlement conference. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my thoughts on what a settlement conference is it's the judge in plain clothes, it's the prosecutor and it's my lawyer and it's me and my family could attend, and we're going to get together off the record and we're going to negotiate a deal, right? And finally, I was going to be able to say the things I wanted to say. My parents could say the things they wanted to say. My wife could say what she wanted to say, and my lawyer could advocate for me and I could advocate for myself, and then we're going to come together on 5 years. That's not how it worked.
I had no idea. It was nowhere near how that ended up.
Basically, you guys showed up. They already had me in the jury box. My lawyer had already came to me and said, hey, your 8-year plea, stipulated 8 years. You have 30 minutes to talk it over with your family. If you don't accept this plea with all the different cases that you have, with all the different charges, plus all the many other charges we can now bring up on you, because you and me both know there's plenty out there, you're probably looking at over 100 years. Mm-hmm. Some insane, like couldn't even, and the truth is, when I was looking at what I was doing in my behavior, of course I minimize it and I justify it and I, because it allows me to continue my negative behavior. But truthfully, some of this stuff, I thought was like a misdemeanor. Like, isn't that like a shoplifting charge or something? No, it is organized retail theft, and they are sending you for football numbers. And man, I remember that settlement conference. I remember we're sitting there, and I'm on one side next to my lawyer, the prosecutor's to the left, and the judge is sitting in a chair right in front of us, and you guys are sitting right behind me in the spectator box. Right? And they said he got 8 years. My lawyer looked defeated. I was so mad at him that day. And I remember I looked over at that little young hotshot prosecutor. He was younger than me. And he looked at me like he thought it was just the funniest thing in the world.
He laughed, didn't he?
Yeah, he laughed.
He said, no, we're not taking it. We'll take it to trial. Ha!
Yeah, so then I look at my lawyer and he's like, dude, you got to sign it. And so then I looked at the prosecutor and was like, well, let's go to trial then. I'm taking it to trial. I'm not signing it. Let's go to trial. And he looked at me and he laughed at me. He said, are you kidding me? And then he showed a stack of CDs of all the videos and all the different things. And I remember you're crying, my mom's crying, my dad's sitting there. And I remember I looked back at you guys and I was like, what do I do? And you're like, sign. I mean, that's the only thing you can do is sign. And so I signed that day and they sentenced me right then and there. The judge went, put on his, his robe or whatever, he put the robe on, read all the cases. It took like 3 hours, it felt like, to read out all the cases. Me admit guilt. And he sentenced me to 8 years that day. And I remember I got sentenced, and I knew that within the next couple weeks I was going to be transferred into the Department of Corrections to begin an 8-year prison sentence. And I'll tell you right now, when you're calculating how many Christmases, how many calendars, how many grades, and you need a pen and a piece of paper for things like that, it's, you're in for a journey. I still didn't have a program of recovery. You had never been through this before. You had still truly didn't know the extent of what had happened and how bad it truly was and really how we were going to get through it. Part 2 is going to talk about our journey in prison through an 8-year incarceration, me finding recovery, and then coming up now next month on the 19th will be 3 years of being released, and ultimately on Monday, the opening of Desert Recovery Center's business together with you and some childhood friends. But I remember, when I got sentenced and we had that phone call, and it was emotional, and I knew that I was going to be sentenced. And I knew I was going to be going on this, and then, they send you to Alhambra, and we knew we weren't going to be able to talk or see each other for a considerable period of time, and we knew it was going to be a lot of years. And that's how the journey began. And I left you with no money. You didn't have a job at this point because you were a stay-at-home mom, because I had built another business and took everything over again. So you didn't have a job. You didn't have a car. Your parents, let's just say, weren't very happy with me. Why would they be? Right. I mean, that's, and you ended up moving in with my parents, with our daughter who was had just turned 2. With no money, no anything, and you had to rebuild our life and start that while this unknown of me being gone, and how do you support him, and what really happened, and resentment and fear, and there's so many levels to it. But I wasn't even done yet. That's the crazy part, is I was just getting warmed up. I end up, and we'll talk about this on part 2, but I end up going on a worse run of active addiction and acquiring a worse drug habit than I have ever had. So that pivotal moment, the transformation, and then what life's like today, tune in for part 2. And I'll never forget when I touched down on that prison yard and I sat there for the first time, and I pulled a chair out from my cell. I was in Tucson Complex, and I sat out in front of and I looked out onto the yard, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? Like, this is going to be tough. This is day 1 of 7 more years. And where do I go and what do I do? The good news is we found the path, and now we get to show others. But it was a journey to get there. So tune in for part 2. Continue to like, subscribe, share. Part 2 will be dropping a few days after this episode. As soon as we can get it up there, we'll get it for you guys. But again, like, subscribe, share, continue to share the message of hope.